Hello, my name is Nakia Brown. I am the founder and CEO of Roots and Rivers Collective. And this past Wednesday on May 27th, I attended something called the Longest Table. How do I say that in Dutch?
De Langste Tafel.
The Langste Tafel. And it was my first time attending an event of this kind, and I was positively overwhelmed. I remember standing on top of the terrace in front of a beautiful mess looking out at, I believe they recorded 1,500 people, which is wild considering that they offered a similar event last year, but it was indoors, and I think a little over 200 people attended. So that's a huge increase since last year. And I remember looking out, and I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to find a seat in this sea of people? And I remember going to the very first long table I saw. I was like making my way down the line, looking and praying for an opening. And then I saw you and I saw a space next to you, and I was like, is this seat taken? And you just generously gestured your hand for me to take a seat. And so I did. And you immediately engaged me in conversation, which I feel like that was definitely the atmosphere of the event. It was very welcoming and open. And so we had a great conversation, but then you had to jet off eventually. And I wanted to continue the conversation, especially since the focus of this month's Insight article for my company is on social responsibility. And that relates to the initiative of the Longest Table as well as to the work that you do. So we're going to continue our conversation that we started on Wednesday. But because folks have not had the opportunity to hear a little bit of your story and your journey, how about you offer us an introduction? So can you briefly share about your background and how you became involved in advocacy work? And I don't even know if I said your name. Did I say your name?
I don't know. My name is Caroline Siebbeles.
Yes, okay.
That's okay. So what age would you like me to start? You know, I mean, this is the activist group I have now. I've been having had it for like 5 years, 5.5 years. But yeah, when I was younger, I also, did things.
You were a bold young person. I believe when we talked on Wednesday, you shared that your advocacy journey started when you were 13 years old, and you had this empathy, this burden for people who were in prisons, you said. Can you share a bit about that?
Yeah. I don't know why, but I've always sort of thought of people who were in prison and then being tortured. And that, the idea of that people should know about this and people should, we should get them released, something like that. And come to think of it, I became a member of Amnesty International, of a sort of writing group.
And how, at the age of 13?
At the age of, I think 14.
Okay.
Or so, but it also sort of coincided with, I had to go to sort of Bible classes when I was 12, I think, or 13. And then I asked the Reverend, when you do good, when you think of other people, when you sort of share what you have, but you just do that, isn't that the same as doing it from the Bible's perspective, believing in God and His Son, Jesus, etc.? And then the Reverend repeated again and again, no, it's better when you do it as a Christian. And I did not agree. So I came home and told my mother, I'm not going back to these Bible classes because you have to be sort of a Christian. It's better to be one. And then I think a year later or so I became a member of Amnesty because then you could do things without having to be Christian.
A part of a religious affiliation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So wow, you were politically and socially activated from the ripe age of 13 and 14 years old. How did that inform the rest of your journey?
Well, I've always been a member of Amnesty International and participated in many demonstrations and activities. I remember once, I think I was, 16 or so, there was for Uruguay, or Paraguay, I think Uruguay, people were, it was in the news, dictatorship, and they would sort of build a cage in a shopping mall, and then we just stood there, and we were not blindfolded, but sort of
wearing masks.
Yeah, no, well, just our mouths, so we were supposed to shut up. We couldn't speak.
Okay.
Out of solidarity with the people there, and we just stood there the whole day, something like that. Yeah, well, I don't know why you do these things, but and that's much later in 2018, I think, people started arriving on the Greek islands of Lesbos, in particular, people fleeing from Syria, Turkey, Iraq. And at first people were sort of helped by the Greek people, were helped from the boats, they were brought to the camps, etc. So I went there as a volunteer, and then I did that a few times, and then when you get back to your life in Amsterdam, being this privileged white woman, I didn't want to be a woman that just went to Greece for a few weeks to help out or something. I mean, and the people were still there. I can travel, I have a passport, they don't. So that is unfair in itself. So then I met other people, and then we established a sort of activist group. Yeah. And we've been coming together for 5 years, every month, with speakers and music, and we commemorate people who drowned in the Mediterranean or the European borders. Yeah.
And for people who might not be familiar with the work of Amnesty International or even the Refugee Company and A Beautiful Mess, can you provide a brief summary of the purpose of these programs and initiatives?
Yeah. Amnesty International, I think it was established in 62, 63 by a lawyer from London. And the idea was that human rights should be protected. People should not be tortured, should not disappear into prisons, etc. But you cannot have used violence. That was sort of where they drew the line. I mean, you can argue differently, but they said when we start defending people who did use violence, then it will be more complicated.
So the practice of civil disobedience.
Yeah, and then they set up offices all over the world, and they started with these writing groups, and there was no internet or computers, so you actually had to write. And then I joined this writing group at the place where I lived at the time, and most of them were pensionados, or retired people who were retired, and in my eyes very old, but that was sort of that started it. And I remember my father saying, you're a member now of this leftist group, and what are you doing there? And they're all communists or something. And then later, when he sort of learned more about it, I heard from friends of his that he was very proud of his eldest daughter doing this or that. So people always have these ideas about something and prejudices, and then when you get to know what it's really like,
And what was your motivation?
Yeah, I don't know.
Right, because I'm sure you're not alone in feeling terrible about the injustices that are happening around the world. But you also that led you to do something.
Yeah.
Like what motivated action?
I don't know. I mean, you can also people who are helping their neighbors, or just in their own circle. So it's as long as you sort of are engaged with other people. And why I went to Lesbos, or I don't know. I just did. But when you come back, you cannot, you have to continue doing something. You cannot just live in your own bubble and think, life is great because we are free in Amsterdam and we, have everything that we need. No, it's not wrong. And also, if it were the other way around, if I were a refugee going to a country and people would say, no, I don't want you because, we're full or something like that, And you will draw the line at some point, I think, but we don't have to draw any lines so far.
And then what about the initiative of the Longest Table? Have you participated in an event like this before? What were your expectations? What was the experience like?
I know a few people of the Refugee Company and the Beautiful Mess, because the Beautiful Mess is a restaurant run by refugees, and they have their residence permits, but they've come a long way. So that's great because they can sort of have their own business, so to speak. And my activist group, which is called Wij Maken Plek Amsterdam, which means we make space for everyone, was sort of invited to have dinner with them. And they also invited people from, I don't know, an AZC, that is a place like where asylum seekers can sort of live when they're still in the procedure. But a lot of towns in Amsterdam, in Holland, don't want migrants, don't want refugees, so they are really, very much against it. And there was at some point at a centre, they set fire just in front of it. So the refugee company, invited people from Oosterdok, place is called, to say, okay, that was horrible, because the people were trapped inside. There was fire outside.
Yes.
They came from conflict zones and war zones and countries. So that was very scary. And all politicians, they only reacted, oh, no, we can't have, people taking the right into their own hands. No one said anything about the refugees who were inside the building, what it must have been like for them. So they were invited now to say, okay, look, there are people who welcome you, and we're not all like what you see in the media. And I think we're even the majority. People who say, okay, if I, who can place themselves in their shoes, or but it's the media, they go for and it's called fascist or racist, but I think you have to be careful using all these phrases, because then they become meaningless. You say fascist, what? Like left wing or right wing.
Is lost.
Define it. What is left wing? What is right wing? What is
Take control of the narrative.
Yeah, because now it seems when you care for other people, that's something that only people on the left do. No, of course not.
Right.
You have to.
It's human nature.
Be nuanced about it.
Yeah. Okay. For the sake of being antagonistic, right? Someone might say, "What can one dinner do?" How can one dinner bring about change or social progress? How do you respond to critics who argue that conversations alone do not create systemic change?
Yeah, well, that's bullshit, I think.
To be frank.
Because every change starts with a conversation, with people speaking up. I think women would not have the right to vote if at some point in the past, a few of them started speaking up for themselves. So that's how it starts. But it takes a long time.
It takes time.
And that's frustrating, very much so. And my activist group, so we've come together for like 64 times now over the past 5 years or so. And there were moments that we thought, okay, there's no point in doing this. It's, the government's getting more and more right wing, etc., etc. But then someone always said, no, all the more reason for us to keep on doing what we're doing. And that goes for the refugee company too, and A Beautiful Mess, and there's many initiatives.
Yes. So it seems like perhaps because of the fact that there are so many initiatives that are rallying around these efforts, they're reinforcing each other, and that's giving you the continued motivation to keep going, to keep trying, to keep raising your voice.
Yeah.
You're not in it alone.
No, and it is difficult because, well, this perhaps is a bit of a different topic, but when you consider now what's happening in Palestine, it feels like that you have no power to sort of prevent Netanyahu and the United States from doing what they're doing, the genocide, the ethnic cleansing, and still, you heard of the flotilla, all these sailing boats sailing to Gaza with food and baby supplies, etc. But still, they're in the news. People from all over the world are protesting, and at some point, things will change.
So
you have to keep believing that.
right.
But many people will lose their lives, won't be
Mhm.
witnesses of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
So there are a lot of sacrifices
Yeah.
that are being made, but your belief in hope, in
Yeah.
the fact that things will eventually change, that gives you the motivation to keep going and keep trying.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And I remember I was taking part in a sort of, it's called a peace walk.
Yes.
It's like a pilgrimage. It's happening actually right now all over Europe, and then everyone at some point comes together to go to Jerusalem to find peace between Palestinians and Jews and everyone in a non-violent manner.
Mm-hmm.
And that is important. And the idea of a pilgrimage is that, you know, you walk the whole day and then there's someone next to you
Yeah.
that you do not know, and then you say, who I am, so, blah, 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 and you get to know each other, and you want the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
peace for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very simple actually, but yeah, that's where you should start.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you say a pilgrimage. Sometimes I think of it an individual journey, but the way you describe it's very relational. Like you're doing this in community.
Yeah,
and
because I'm not religious. No, but it's still a
no
pilgrimage.
relational.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But you're doing this in community, and there is this synergy that's created because everyone has the same mission and the same mindset. Like, we want peace. We don't want division. We don't want to take sides. We care about humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you want to do something. There are many people who look away.
Yeah.
They just don't want to know. They don't know. They don't watch the news. They don't. Yeah, that's worrisome.
The truth can be very uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah, but why? Because it upsets your own comfortable life. So why would you do it?
Mm-hmm.
So that, I find that difficult, especially with young people.
Mm-hmm.
They don't read newspapers anymore, and they just,
Some young people.
Some young people do. I know. You're right.
During our conversation, I remember as you were sharing a little bit about your journey and your work around social advocacy, you used the term white privilege. And you said, I was confronted with my own white privilege. And I wasn't expecting that. What was that process like for you?
Well, at some point you become aware that life, many things that you take for granted, there are other people. Okay, you're black. Okay, so like black people.
I am indeed.
It's more difficult for them, even when your surname is not Dutch or American or then it's even more difficult to get a job. There are all these sort of small things that you're not really. That some of you weren't. I was not aware of this for a long time.
How did you become aware?
I don't know.
Was it like, did you have a dream? Did you have a conversation? Was there this sudden epiphany?
You read things, you read the
Okay.
newspapers, you read articles, you listen to other people. I think that's it. And at some point maybe you don't agree, or you say, I cannot help being white, something like that. But and I cannot, I'm not. It's like. People say, I'm not guilty. We became rich because we had colonies, right? A lot of European countries. I'm not guilty. I wasn't even there. But you can take some kind of responsibility because our standard of living today is sort of based on times when when we had plantations and people who were slaves, or we have a new name for that too. We don't say slaves anymore, but people who were made into,
who were enslaved.
Yeah, who were enslaved. That's the word exactly. Yeah. Again, that's another moment of where you take it for granted because in the history books at school it says slaves and slavery, and that was a period, and then there was another period. What the? Sorry, I can't say that, but what does it actually mean that you were sort of, taken from a country away to the stories. But I don't know, how do you become, just but read a lot, listen to people, be open, I don't know. I don't know.
And I see you using that awareness for good, right? You're not you've educated yourself on your privilege, and you're leveraging it for a social good. And I think that's beautiful. When we have these kind of conversations, topics of white saviorism also comes up. And I'm curious about what your thoughts are on that topic.
Could you define that for me? But that's what people did in the past?
No, so white saviorism meaning
Or today?
Today, white saviorism meaning that, similar to you, people feel really guilty about what happened in the past. They want to right these wrongs. And so typically white people, specifically from the global north, feels that they need to go then to rescue non-white people who are in situations that are dire or unfortunate or impoverished. The problematic aspect of that is that the underlying assumption is that these individuals do not have the agency or the will or the skills to solve their own problems. So sometimes this comes up in conversation, like, okay, people want to, use their privilege for good, but then how do you negotiate that with this aspect, this complexity of white saviorism?
Yeah. Well, I think it's complicated, but I think, first of all, let's say black people, I mean, they're not victims. They are people just like me, obviously. The only difference is the color of your skin, the sort of fabric of your hair, I think, and your bone structure, but that's sort of very physical. That's it. There's no such thing as different races, even. We call it racism, that's the word that we use, but we are the same race, like you have dogs and cats and animals, you can have different races. We are the same race, we just have we look differently. We look different, that's the only thing. So we're not victims or no, because so we're the same. You have the same emotions, abilities, talents, or whatever. Everyone has this, I can't find words for it. But
it sounds like you're saying, because I want to push back a little bit,
okay,
because I understand what
although
you're saying.
our situations are not the same. Yeah.
Right, and
life is easier for me in a lot of respects.
Right, and because of the social constructs that exist and because we're socialized into those social constructs, my experience has been very different from your experience. So in terms of being humans, yes, we're the same. And I think what you're saying in addition to that is that in terms of capability, we're the same in that respect. Like, we're equally capable to affect change. Is that what I'm hearing? I just want to make sure. When you say that we are the same, what are you implying? Because our experiences are in fact different.
Yeah.
And then we may not call ourselves victims or even perceive ourselves as victims, but throughout history and even in the current day, black people as well as other minority groups are victimized.
Yeah.
Right. So again, experiences are different. So yeah, if you want to just expound on what you're trying to imply. But maybe you're talking about capacity and capability. I'm not sure.
Well, I don't know. We're the same, but circumstances are different. And realizing that, you can sort of try to change something or help, maybe is a patronizing word, but be open to, okay, what does it need for you to, I don't know, to go to university? And it's more difficult or than it is for me. So how can you make a difference there?
Yeah, partnership, allyship.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then again, you have to, how do you say that? Swim upstream? Is that a lot of literal translation of the Dutch?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
Whereas a lot of white privileged people never had to swim upstream. But that also means that, they don't have certain abilities because they never were in that situation. So people who swim upstream often are stronger because they had to, you know, persevere and accept disappointments and keep going. So that's build your character more than, you know, when life is easy. So we can learn from that.
Oh, that's beautiful. There's a resilience that's earned. Yeah. Okay. I have one final question, which I'm surprised by. The time has just been flying. What does social responsibility mean to you, in your own words?
It has to do with finding a balance, I think, between. I mean, you can't help other people or do things for other people 24/7, obviously. So you have to find a balance, but it's difficult. Okay, now I'm allowed to go to the beach and, you know, or have a coffee on the terrace or whatever, things for me, for myself, without, you know, being social. And then you think, okay, and now we come together with our activist group, or we speak out for refugees or people without papers. And I also learned, perhaps I can mention my daughter, she's 29, she was in Colombia for a few months, where many people are begging in the streets, there's so much poverty. And then she said, Mama, I always, people start to become sort of less human when they're dirty, when they smell, you know, when they're lying in the street. That's what happens to us. You think, you know, I don't want you have to have a shower first or something. And then my daughter taught me, you know, always look people in the eyes when they're begging for money or whatever. There is another son, daughter, father, mother. Yes. But he's lying on the street and he's having this or addicted to whatever. But try to see we're really the same. Right. Fortunately, we're not in that situation, but you know, So
these are human beings, and they're deserving and worthy of dignity and respect, and even as that simple gesture of looking someone in the eye, right, in a moment of difficulty, is a way of saying, like, I see you, and I see that you have dignity.
Yeah, and when you don't see other people as human beings, then something like, you know, what Israel's doing to the Palestinians, they dehumanize, and that do all groups in power, they dehumanize the other group or the other, and then you can sort of, you know, do horrible things. As long as you realize, you know, it could be your father, mother, son, daughter, you know, it's different. But then, you always have to be, because it's also in me, in every one of us, I think, to, you know, you want to feel better than another person at times, or you I don't know. So you always have to check yourself, have this dialogue with yourself.
And if you had to put that statement into one word, what would it be? Social responsibility is
thinking of other people as human beings.
One word
is social responsibility is, I don't know about the word responsibility. Social responsibility. Taking care, looking after, sharing, something like that.
Yeah, and I think it's very insightful that you talked about caring for yourself as you care for others. You mentioned that. I think that's so important, and sometimes that gets lost in these conversations because you want to do good, and like you said, like, you know, like you feel compelled after becoming aware. Like you said, you went to Greece, you saw how people were living in these refugee camps, and it's just like I can't go back and lead this normal, comfortable life and pretend I didn't see what I saw. So it does change you. But balancing that with, because it's a lot. Like sometimes I read the news and I feel overwhelmed. It's like, that's a lot to carry on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. So self-care is very, very important.
It's also a means of survival. I mean, you have to make fun. You have to
function
and sort of block the suffering of other people. You have to, you block it. That's what you do. Otherwise, you can't sort of live a normal life. And that's what everyone does. Also in the camps or in the, people always find ways of.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I would say block or I see it as block. I see, from my experience, I think I should share with you, I have parents from the Caribbean. I've spent time in Jamaica. I also grew up in West Philly. Like I've seen someone travel through a number of places. And so you become aware of the misfortunes and the varying degrees of poverty and injustice, and you have to do something with that. And I agree, you can't just walk around with that keen hyper awareness all the time. You won't be able to function. I feel like you just would become emotionally paralyzed. But I don't know if it's blocking as much as it is living in this constant duality. I feel like this is constant tension and duality that we live in. And so the awareness is there, but it's like you almost have to control how much that awareness impacts you. Yeah.
I agree.
Caroline, thank you so much for this conversation. I appreciate your time, your honesty, your transparency, your willingness to have these conversations. It's a sensitive topic, especially during this political climate that we are in globally. So I appreciate you, all that you're doing in your social activist group, and even that small gesture of inviting me to sit down and having a conversation with me on Wednesday and continuing that conversation today. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. It was fun.
Yeah,
Thank you.
All right, that's our